Welcome to this episode of Level with Emily Reese, featuring a conversation with composer Ross Tregenza about his music for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Cyberpunk 2077, Deathloop, and more. Mostly about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, though. We had Ross on the show a few months ago, along with the CEO of the studio that made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Wes Keltner. So Ross and Wes were on the show a few months back to talk about the game itself and then a little bit about the music and sound. Well, Ross is back to do a much deeper dive on the soundtrack for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And as I mentioned, we also talk about his sound design for the game, as well as his music for Cyberpunk 2077 and Deathloop, for which he earned a BAFTA nomination, which is a pretty big deal. We also talk about his band Go Techie, which is an industrial electronic band I really like. And if you like the band, just go to Bandcamp. Their music's free download, which is really cool. So you can just get a whole bunch of awesome British industrial music from, a really great band at no cost. It's awesome. So check them out over on Bandcamp. Go Techie, Goteki. I'll put something here. But we start off with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Join us on Discord. That link is down in the show notes. Please subscribe to us here on YouTube. And if you can support us financially, head over to Patreon, patreon.com/level. All right, here is Ross Tregenza talking about his many soundtracks and sound design as well for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
My role at the game's development company is audio director, but in practical terms, for Texas Chainsaw, I was the lead sound designer and composer. So I did 98% of the sound in the game and 100% of the music. So wow. It's as a control freak, that was just my ultimate dream, really. just got to do it all. So I've been trying to do this for years.
Really? Because, so many composers or sound designers would prefer to focus, right? So talk more about that.
I can see that. And I think on other projects, it would make sense to be wanting to be really focused on one or the other. But Texas Chainsaw, it's such a gray area, the whole thing of what's sound design and what's music, like the original film. So it would have been much more difficult for me to have just been just the composer and figure out where I draw the line of what's becoming sound design, what's becoming like feedback in the game and stuff like that. But when I'm doing all of it, it's nice. A lot of the sound design is pretty much music. A lot of the music is pretty much sound design. And it's more of just one big canvas of stuff that's all part of the same language. So there's no sense of a divide. And sometimes I think you don't even, when you're listening, you don't even know if it's like environmental sounds, if it's a bit of the music, if it's trying to tell you something. It's a little bit blurry and fuzzy around the edges, which I really like.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense, especially with a horror game, right? Because, I'm sure you can think of many projects where that would have been really weird to do both, or maybe not weird, but just a little more complex. But they depend so much upon each other in horror. Yeah. And you've been a horror guy, I don't know for how long, I just know you love it. And so can you think back and remember feeling that way? Like, oh my God, I would love to do all of it. I want to do the sound and the music for this project, or,
Yeah, like I said, I've been a horror nerd my whole life. I love horror films and stuff. And I've done quite a lot of sci-fi stuff over the years, but never anything so very specifically in the horror genre before. So when my studio boss, Gary Edwards at Sumo Nottingham, when he announced that we were doing this, I just went crazy. And for the next week, I was just thinking, they may have a composer in mind already, or they may have some a very tight direction on the audio in general. But it's like, I'm really going to try and I really want to do this. I want to do as much as they'll let me. So I wanted to make sure all the first stuff that I did for them. I just tried to do represent myself as well as I could. And there was there was sort of teething period where I was trying to make it as cool as I can, but it wasn't quite right, and Wes was giving me immediate feedback of like, this is too modern, or this is too, like sci-fi sounding. And so it wasn't quite right at first, but we got there fairly quickly to like the basics of the language. I was just watching the film again and again obsessively, and then digging out all the instruments I had that have got like that 70s vibe. And I'd done Deathloop just within 18 months, or maybe it was 2 years. I can't remember the timeline, and that's very like late 60s, early 70s feel to the music. So I had a bit of background with like emulating like reel-to-reel tape and retro like tape echoes and distortions and things like that. So I kind of had some stuff in my toolbox to get going already. But after a bit of a few first steps, it's like the language came alive fairly quickly, which is lovely.
Sure. And, listening to it, and I think there are many horror scores where that's the case, where it's questionable where one starts and the other begins. And you get that sense as you're listening too. There are a lot of tracks where you're like, okay, clearly I could be exploring the house right now.
Yeah.
And then suddenly there's Leatherface or whatever, and, I just, I spent a lot of time listening to a lot of your other music, particularly of your band. And is it Goteki?
Goteki, that's right. Yeah.
Goteki, love it, and we're going to talk about it later. It's really fun, and so it's obvious that you, anybody who looks into your background can kind of find your roots, and even though the music in that band is like really, electro, like, just electro, kind of like mid 90s. I think of like Depeche Mode. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but
that's very on. I love Depeche Mode.
yeah. I mean, and so do I. And I think, I connected with that immediately. Just, but a lot of that is really melodic, even if it's, kind of whatever genre you call it, death electro, or what do you call it?
That's my kind of like sort of colorful term for it. Like, I guess it's sort of somewhere between industrial and electro, really.
Yeah,
a little bit of like new romantic in there and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, so much. There's melody, there's progression, there's form.
That was difficult, actually. That's very much a point of difficulty moving from like being writing music in my band and with other bands and doing remixes, stuff like that. Like I say, it's melodic, it's very structured, and I've grown up writing songs thinking that they can be a little experimental, but in the back of my head they always kind of have a bit of like intro, verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, outro. And I really had to sort of beat that out of myself a little bit when I started getting more into composing for games and stuff, just because it doesn't necessarily work. You can, if you've got like a linear piece, you can draw on that background of bringing it up to a key catchy moment and stuff, but certainly didn't work at all for Texas. It really needed to be purely textural and layered, and I mean, with the exception of like, there's about 3 songs on the soundtrack that are, although they're still in that language of the game and of the film, they are a little bit more in like a traditional song structure of, at least they've got like hooks kind of, whereas the other tracks in the soundtrack, that they're really just montages of elements in the game. Like, they don't exist in the game in that form at all. The game is made up of like, I have no idea, maybe 60 layers of textural stuff that's driven by what you're doing in the game and stuff like that. So it doesn't have any structure really at all. It's dependent on what you're doing as a player, because it feeds on how healthy your character is, how healthy your team are, how recently you were attacked by someone, when you last saw somebody, and stuff like that. So every single game really will always be completely different. So you can use structure, and normally people do use structure with those like dynamic music systems in games, and you'll be moving like chunk of music to chunk of music. You'd be like, okay, now there's a bit more action. We're going to move into a middle action. Now we've got a high tension state. And there'll normally be like 16 bar sections or something like that. You'll move between these loops and stuff. But so the base principle was the same, but for Texas Chainsaw, there's no sections of music. It's just there's like any given time there's about 10 layers of texture that could swell up and swell down again depending on what you're doing. And so it's this funny web of like distorted waves of noise that come in and out, driven by your behavior in the game, which is nice because I've certainly never worked on anything so sort of abstract and loose before, which was it was very different.
Yeah, it is, and of course you used some really incredible sounds too, like animal sounds and human screaming and all the things. Do you want to just talk about a few of those things that were kind of fun to decide to record? Like your cat. Because you just did a BBC interview that was fantastic. And you talk about your mom's fridge and just stuff like that. It's just hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think early on, I realized that the best thing I can do is try and be like Wayne Bell, the original composer, what I think he must have done, which is just try everything, throw things in, just slap the paint on the canvas. Is the way I like to think about it. See what happens. You can take things out again if they feel weird or they don't land. And so that got pretty loose and pretty experimental early on, like right from like the beginning when I was in lockdown and I was just wandering around the house going, okay, that's a cool texture. I'm gonna rub that with this spoon, and then I'm gonna hit that bit of sheet metal with this plastic fork, and I just tried stuff and built that up. And then as time went on, so I was kind of collecting source material. I was incredibly lucky that I'm sure we must have talked about in that last interview about Wes's apprehension engine, which is the coolest thing ever. It's just a handmade instrument that's just got like sticks and springs and like a spring reverb and a hurdy-gurdy part of it, and it's just everything on it sounds like the most terrifying thing ever. So we had that as like the backbone all the time to like inject that into all the tracks. And I started to build like all this my crazy stuff behind me. I started building more and more and collecting more and more stuff that I told myself I needed it for to work on the soundtrack, but I probably could have lived without it. But it's been a pleasure to sort of build it up and get all these weird things. So I got stuff like this little green fella over here. That's a Soma Lira, which is this cool sort of crazy Russian guy and his company build them, and it's like touch plates on it that send it through your body. So like depending on the moisture in your body and stuff, it'll sound slightly different, and it's the pressure you apply on it. And then sort of looping controls to find the sound, and it just sounds really otherworldly and you get that uncanny valley feel because it sounds a bit like a human scream or a human moan, but also not quite. And it's I don't know, some kind of like this sort of visceral, uncomfortable feeling when you hear it, because it's similar to the sounds of like human pain or human scream, but just slightly off. So stuff like that. And then I got this instrument called a Scary Crown, they called it. It's a small Italian company that build these custom weird instruments, and it's you can't quite see it. That's the base of it over there, but it's got a little prong sticking out the top, and you just play it with a bow, and it just vibrates through like the bass column, and it just sounds like the gates of hell opening. It's just phenomenal. I was in love with it from the first second I tried it. I just built up more and more of these things, and as time went on, I got like more confident with knowing what would sound good with the language of the game. Generally, it was a case of not using much of any traditional instrumentation. There's a little bit of like Moog synthesizers here and there, but even then, not a lot. And the stuff that I did use from that would be just like a bass drone that I'll then heavily process with like distortions and stuff to cause it to like feel like it's vibrating or feeding back on itself. So with the exception of like one track for the credits of the game, which had a different vibe, everything else is really just there's no traditional instrumentation whatsoever. So it's just been this ongoing build up of crazy stuff that just, the more crazy stuff I threw into it, it sort of built on itself, and it's a never ending snowballing process of horror instruments.
Yeah, that credit song, I just having the soundtrack on in the background, and then that song started, and I was like, well, this must be the credits song, because the vibe is so different, right? So different, and you capture kind of the innocence of, whatever. It has kind of like a naivete to it, right? But then it ends so bleakly. The end of the credits song, I'm just like, oh God, here comes part two. But but talk a little bit about the gear shift and just kind of the psychology behind making the credits song such a different tone.
I've always liked like other games I've composed for. I've often tried to make I don't know why. I think there's like gives it a nice feel to give the credits something different, that's like a little bit of a different energy from the main project. I've always liked that in films when they try something a little different during the credits. This one came out of a discussion with the guys from Gun, the publisher of the game. I had these just little stings when you're playing the game. If you're playing as one of the victims, your goal is obviously to just escape the Leatherface and his horrific family. And so when you escape, I did like a little sting that was fairly quite in the language of the game, but pretty jubilant. It was actually like almost a major chord for the first time in the game. So we almost got a major chord in there. But Wes and a couple of the other guys, they gave me some feedback. It's like, even if you've escaped this situation, nothing is ever going to be good for them ever again, because this is so horrifically scarring. Like the stuff that they've seen and gone through in this house, which is like, there was the motto of the film was like, who will survive and what will be left of them. So they wanted to be that. It's like, what's left of them when they've escaped? They've lost so much. So it's like everything else, it's just relentlessly harrowing and bleak. But I thought the idea of trying to do a song that's supposed to be like what it's like after the experience would be interesting. So I tried to like have this balance of a little bit of tiny bit of relief, but also just really sort of drenched in melancholy and this tension that doesn't leave. I think I'd remembered. I don't know if I'm misremembering what the music sounded like, but the film Deliverance, which I think that's mid-70s as well. I think I'd have to check. Which again is a very bleak film, and at the end of the film, he's kind of escaped these murderous people and everything, and he managed to kill them and escape and everything, but he doesn't. There's a lingering last shot of the river where it all happened and the banks of it, and there's kind of a sense of he's not going to get over this, and I really liked that as a mood. So that's what I was trying to do with it. I think I wanted to, like, yes, it's over, but it's going to live with them from now on. So
yeah. Mission accomplished. Yeah. Mission definitely accomplished. So I got to hear about the cat. Being a cat lover, it's well known the company is named after the cat and all the things. So so tell me about your cat's contribution to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, I mean, my poor cats have been here because I've done like 95% of this work from my home studio, and my cats are just living here with me. So my cat's been sitting on my lap for most of the time while I've been doing the sounds for these executions and chainsaws shoved through faces and things. So he's used to it. But one day he was just very angry because his dinner was late while I was working, and I just thought he was doing like a really good deep angry purr vibration. I thought, I bet if I record that, pitch it down, reverse it, I bet that sounds kind of cool. So I did, and it did sound cool. There's out-of-tune televisions in the game, and the second I saw them, I thought, oh, that's a sound designer's dream. Like, I could do anything with that. So I've got like a blurring, never-ending mix of source material that just randomly mixes between a load of different layers. So my pitch down reverse cat is on there, and then some like gospel church sounds. Crying babies, people laughing, and like I said, my mum's fridge. I went to visit her one day, and her fridge was just doing this weird pulsing vibration sound, and I thought that's cool. So I just stuck my phone in there and recorded it. And because obviously, like a lot of this source as well, because I do so much heavy manipulation of it. In cases like that, the source doesn't need to be perfectly clean. I mean, I'm already, I kill the high and low end of it quite often as a starting point with this stuff to make it feel more like reel to reel tape stuff, because they didn't really have a lot of like highs and lows. It was very middly. And then I'm layering on loads of distortion and tape modulation and wow and flutter and stuff like that. So when you're doing that much manipulation, you can be pretty sort of open-ended with the source. So yeah, my cat's there.
I love that. No, that's great. That's great. With regards to being a horror lover, and I know you still actively are playing the game because this is a multiplayer game as well, right? So there's ongoing things that you want to be aware of, or you just want to know what it's like, right, to experience it.
Yes.
But talk to me about just scary music and what scares you as someone who's seen a lot of horror, and just talk about that. I've actually recently I've been thinking about putting together like a little like a YouTube discussion thing just for my own love of talking about it, about what it means to make horror music, just because I've thought about it so much over the last few years. Something that I've thought about a lot is I think we touched on this last time actually, is my dislike of signposting and music as a comfort blanket generally in horror films. I think there's a big divide in the way people use music in horror, and a fairly traditional way will be, like you get like rising dread tones when you're about to have something horrible happen. Same as with visual cues, really. Like, some films will hold your hand when you're coming up to something that's about to happen that's awful. Other ones will give you like no indication something terrible is about to happen, or even sort of play with your expectations. So I really don't like it when I'm being told something awful is about to happen, because that just gives you a chance to mentally prepare. And I think it's kind of counter. So it's just against what we're trying to do with horror, really, like to scare and to make you feel out of your comfort zone. So films like Hereditary, I thought was really good for that. There's like a long ticking, pulsing rise through like the first act, I think, almost of Hereditary, that wasn't necessarily tied to the horrific events that happened in it. It was just there, causing you to be slightly unnerved and wondering why we're leading into something. So I guess from that point of view, you can kind of subvert that comfort blanket that people have done with horror for so many years. You can like have like rising like dread tones that don't actually go anywhere, and then that's kind of cool, because then it's taken that away from them, because suddenly they can't trust that comfort blanket that they expect. So it's difficult with Texas Chainsaw, because while I wanted to do as much as I could to like subvert people's expectations and to mess with them basically and make them scared, there's a certain level of like general video game information that does need to be conveyed to make it fair for them as a player. So I try to make those elements fairly subtle. So like if the bad guys are near you, there is like a low, slow rising bass pulse, but the music is playing at the same time. So you need to actively be sort of listening for it. And there are other times in the music, it'll kind of pulse up on its own. And so that there's still some like false positives in there. And I made sure that there was plenty of sounds in the environment that sounded like the chainsaw or footsteps or human breath and things like that weren't. They're just like creaking wood and stuff. I would like bake in the sounds of like breath into like wind and stuff like that, just to mess with people, because I mean that was my goal really, is to make people as scared as possible. I feel bad now I think about it. You do. I think that's what they're there for, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we spent quite a bit of time in our interview previously in the summer talking about the chainsaw itself. And
Yeah.
If I remember right, we talked even about like the complexities of even recording something so freaking loud.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to direct people to that so
Yeah.
we don't have to go over that again. But is there anything you want to add about that? Because we can't not talk about it. It's a big part of what you had to deal with.
It was, it's probably the most difficult bit of sound design for my entire career, I think, the chainsaw. Because first of all, it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It had to be perfect, and it wasn't perfect for a very long time. I worked on it for so long, and I tried from scratch again and again to get it sounding the way it needed to sound. And I kind of managed to convince myself every time I'd get to a point that I'd got it. And I must have known in my heart that it wasn't there, because I would send it off to Wes for him to listen to, and I would kind of pad it with too much information. But I think I've done this and I've done that, and I think it's good because of this and that. If I knew it was perfect, I wouldn't be sending it with this paragraph of caveats all the time. So I'm really pleased that he didn't let me do anything less than what it needed to be. Because the last and final one, I said it to him, and I just said, here it is, see what you think. And there was no paragraph of excuses and information surrounding it. I knew it was right. And
wow.
But I would have absolutely hated it if it wasn't right. To be playing the game now, if I didn't love the way the chainsaw sounded, I don't think I could even play it, to be honest. I'd be upset to know that I hadn't done it justice. So it was a difficult thing, because you got it's like a triangle really of things you have to be right in the middle of, because you've got what that chainsaw really sounds like, and then you've got making it sound cool in a video game. Like normally if you do things like guns in games, like sniper rifles and shotguns and things like that, you've got what they really sound like, which is one thing, and then what people want them to sound like in a video game, which quite often is I've fired shotguns and sniper rifles and I've made them in games. There's almost no connection between the real ones and the ones in games. Yeah. So I had making it cool in a game, what it sounds like in real life, and then the third bit of how it sounded in the film, which was it's a very old film. The recording was very different, and it didn't have the fidelity back then, so it's very distorted, very mid-range, and very chunky and dirty in the film. And so those three elements, I just sort of moved around this triangle trying to find the sweet spot. But got there, thank goodness.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'll definitely be putting more of that in here, because we were lucky to get those sound files from you. We can come back to Texas, or maybe we won't. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I literally just last night, I've been kind of searching for a deep dive gaming wise of what to play. I mean, I've been playing Zelda all summer, whatever. I've played Destiny for way longer than anyone should admit they play Destiny. But I just wanted a new thing. And I finally downloaded Cyberpunk last night, 2077. And I didn't get a chance to explore what your role was. But did you make music for Cyberpunk?
I did all the in-game adverts
cool.
on the TV channels, because it's got that Blade Runner thing of just there's like oversaturation of like screens and adverts everywhere. So I did all of those. It's like 130 different mini tracks basically.
Wow.
On all the big billboards going by, and on the sides of the skyscrapers, and then when in your lift and in your house. So I didn't do the core soundtrack. There's Marcin, their audio director, music director. He wrote a lot of that, and they got a great team of internal composers. And then they commissioned a load of music for the radio stations by really wide range of artists. But it's great because they're rapping about the world that they lived in the future and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So my involvement was just this in-world stuff that's. Although it's in the grand scheme of that very big, very awesome game, my part was just a little dinky one. I'm kind of unavoidable in that soundscape because
I love that.
Wherever you go, there's always one of my little jingles playing. It was great fun. It was incredibly hard work, but incredibly good fun, because I would just be sent like 50 at a time of these adverts. And they were, we had loads of initial discussions. He's saying, like, I don't want it to sound like Blade Runner. I don't want it to be like too much of like any one genre. And the most difficult part was, he said, I want each of these ones to sound like it was written by a different composer. So,
and go.
So I had to do 130 like 10-second jingles, each one sounding like a different composer, which was it was difficult, but it was great fun. And it was one of those cases of sort of digging out different instruments every time and seeing what goes. And the very final one that I did as well, right at the end of it, was it's just like a little TV ident for a channel that just shows adverts. So the other ones are all my other adverts and stuff. But this little weird ident had like all these crazy like cartoon graphics and psychedelic stuff. And it was about like, I can't remember what it was, but it was the last one I did. And I was running out of time, and it was about 3:00 in the morning, and I'd been doing them for as long as I could remember. And I was exhausted, and it's really weird, the music. But that's the one that you hear the most in the game by quite a heavy margin. So this last strange little piece of music that I did is unavoidable in the game.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'm really excited to play. Did you play it too, or were you too you did? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was really excited to play it.
I have been too.
I had no idea that my stuff would be like used all over quite so much. Like from the second you start playing, it's there in the background somewhere all the time. So it was lovely to be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into it. Maybe too excited. Another one I have not played yet is Deathloop, and I did interview Tom Salta. I have known Tom for years and years and years, and so Tom was on the show to talk about his Deathloop work. But I haven't played it yet. You got a BAFTA nomination for that, which is a really big deal. So, and the music is fantastic, and of course, couldn't be more different than, as I'm sure is true with your cyberpunk music, couldn't be more different than Texas. So, so talk about Deathloop and the pivot there to like 60s psychedelic rock and stuff.
It was great fun, Deathloop. That came out of it was one of those sort of just nice sequence of events that meant that I got to work on it. I'd written a load of like original music and remixes for the game Wolfenstein Youngblood in like an 80s style, and they did like a little spin-off game for that. And Deathloop's developer Arcane Leon just worked this tiny little spin-off game, but they were happy with the work I did for that. So when they got deep into Deathloop, they had Tom writing all the core music, like he's lead composer on it. And then me and a guy called Eric Taliber worked on the diegetic in-world music. Same sort of situation as Cyberpunk, really, in that it's just like coming out of speakers, or in clubs you'll hear it, and it's playing on radios dotted around. It's just, again, fairly unavoidable. It's around the map everywhere.
Nice.
And yeah, it's sort of a blend of styles for Deathloop, but it's sort of a late 60s into psychedelic rock with a little bit of like sort of experimental and almost industrial elements here and there. I've never written. I like like the Doors and bands like that. They've got a fantastic sound, but it wasn't really instrumentation or like music that I'd ever done before. So there was quite a learning curve to get that right. I mean, I was back to writing more traditional pop songs basically, because they're all the songs they're usually about 2 minutes long, and I make sure they get to the cool hooks and stuff really quickly, because you tend to be just walking around the world, so you want to make sure people hear the cool bits basically. So almost the opposite of Texas Chainsaw, in that instead of long, textural, dark, it was short, punchy, and poppy. But the audio director for Deathloop was very knowledgeable in music and would really dig down into the details in a way that I massively appreciated. That there were points where like one of the songs, he wanted the drum pattern to be more like the Doors. We got to the point of him like just giving me like a little guide of where he wants the kick and where he wants the snares and things, right? But it wasn't fussing for the sake of fussing or anything like that. The information was always valid, and it helped. And for each of those songs, would get to a point, and then he would just say, "Yes, that's it, beautiful, we've done it." So
yeah. You got to sing on one. I can't remember the name of it. Something about the sun, though.
Sun Goes Down.
Sun Goes Down. Which, first of all, your voice is fantastic. I love your voice. And so that was fun. That you got to do that. So I assume that was maybe for the radio in the game or something like that.
Yeah. All of these tracks are sort of just supposed to be the people in the game are sort of just these eternal party people that are just enjoying the music and drinking and laughing and dancing all the time. So all the songs are fairly light and catchy. That one I wanted to try like a Tom Waits kind of thing. So I tried to do like a big gravelly voice. And it was fun. I hadn't spoken to them about whether or not what they thought about me throwing some vocals in, and I just sent it to him and he liked it. So it's cool. I got away with it. It's fun to hear me doing that weird Tom Waits voice in that game world.
And then there was like the second it started, I was like, oh, there's two people getting busy. There's like horns and an organ, and of course, Heartbreaker is the name of the track. That I burst out laughing. Talk about Heartbreaker. That
was I think that's primarily for use in this like sort of some lounge clubs in it that you can go to with lots of like heart decorations and low lights and sort of a moody 70s sort of loungy, chilled environment. And I've never really written a lot of that. Well, nothing like that really. I mean, that's far away from my industrial roots or like the horror stuff I'm doing now. So writing like some smooth lounge jazz was really pleasant. It went surprisingly well. I mean, it's really not my area, but it was a lot of fun to write. I got to do one of the other ones was had like a lot of sitars and sort of sort of Indian vibe to it, which was fun as well, because obviously that for this sort of like hippie and into psych rock roots, that was nice to touch on that sort of sitar-y sort of sound. So again, I've always loved this kind of music. There's always a little bit of me that's a hippie, I think. So getting to play sitars and smooth sax and stuff, it's a treat.
What is your main instrument?
I mean, I grew up playing guitar, but really since my late teens, I'd say just keyboards, not so much piano, because I've got no classical training. My piano playing, guitar playing are very much sort of band guy versions of it. That there's very little. Now obviously I know more than I did when I was younger, but still, I start most songs. I'll turn on a piano sound and I'll start playing with a few chords or a hook, and then I go from there. And I've always done that. So 19 out of 20 times, anything that I'm writing, I'll sit down at piano and just play it a little bit. But I'm a generalist, I would say. And from all my years, my band and everything, that was like industrial music. So I write for keyboards, but it's just layered synth and stuff like that mostly.
Well, that's a great segue. Let's go ahead and talk about Goteki. I just, from the first opening chords, I was like, yep, this is up my alley. I love it. And there's so much music out there. You've got a ton of it up on Bandcamp. I don't know if all of that is on Spotify or not, but there's a lot out there. So talk about that.
Yeah.
Just talk about that for a minute.
that's been most of my life really. I was I was a goth in my late teens, and I was really very super obsessively heavily into the UK goth scene, and which ties into the industrial music scene. They're kind of they've always been linked. Like it's very like if you go to a goth club, they'll play industrial music and vice versa. So I'd always been playing around with music, and like my family they're not musicians, but they're very musical. They've always loved it. And my dad and I would play guitars together. So it's always been in me to do music and just to play it for fun and stuff. And I was was in the goth and industrial scene in my late teens and things. I just kind of started getting jealous of all the people writing the music. I was like, I would write some industrial music. So I bought my first keyboard. And my first band was like a kind of a comedy goth band called Sneaky Bat Machine, where we did like really, really happy goth songs, which is a bit of a strange blend of things. But it actually went quite well. People liked it, but it was kind of limited in its scope. And I think it was when I was about 22 or 20, something that young anyway. I moved over into my new band, Goteki. So I think Goteki's about 23 years old now. Like, wow. There were, for my 20s to my 30s, I was just working in clothes shops and doing part-time jobs and things, and always spending all my just passionately working on my band. Never really thinking about like other avenues that I could do to make money professionally as a musician, because I mean I never made much of anything with my band. It was very popular at various times. We played all over the world, but you know, as like a small to mid industrial band, that's not a that's not a career financially. So but it's Goteki's always been there, and it still is. We just played a really nice gig at a festival in the UK about 4 weeks ago. My band, one other guy, Ali, my friend, is in the band. It's just the two of us now, and we gig when we can. But you know, with my composing career now, it's more difficult. But I've kept it ticking over through the years, and I'll release an album every few years now. I don't have the capacity to do it that, you know, like 40 gigs a year or whatever it was I was doing when I was younger. But I love it when I do. I get stressed now because it's so long between gigs. I get really nervous and stressed and tense and worked up, and then I'll do the gig and remember why I like playing live.
Yeah, that's amazing. How many full albums do you have, would you say? How many?
It's 4 albums, and then I think about 4 remix albums, and then about 20, 25 EPs and singles and things, and a lot of just other peripheral bits, and probably 30 or 40 remixes for people over the years and stuff. So if anyone's interested, there's no shortage of content. It's all like the bulk of it's on Spotify, and there's a lot.
And you do instrumentals too, which is cool.
Yeah, it's I think like we touched on, I'm a big fan of Depeche Mode and Nine Inch Nails and bands like that. And and David Bowie, who's always been my biggest influence. But like Bowie and Trent Reznor, they've never been scared to throw like a few instrumental tracks in on the albums in between all the vocal tracks. And it's nice. It kind of different energy to them. And I think doing those instrumental tracks certainly helped me later on in my career when it came to understanding what it means to write a track with no vocals, because there's a different feel to it. So always enjoyed them.
And then, you know, a lot of bringing in a lot of samples and stuff like that, of course. Talk about that. I mean, do you hear a sample or you know, hear a clip of audio and just automatically that's your inspiration for the song, or how does that kind of play into the creative process?
It was kind of a standard part of industrial music in the 90s, that a lot of the biggest songs of that genre and stuff, it was just very common for them to throw in clips from things they loved. I mean, you can't really do it so much now. It was the early days, and nobody was really thinking about like licensing and copyright things. They just be like, oh, I'm going to put in a cool little clip from Alien. And nowadays, I guess that's why you don't really hear it anymore. But back then, like when we did gigs, we would often just bring like a little sampler with a load of like touch buttons on the front, and just load it from disc with like little samples from like horror films we liked and sci-fi films, and we would just play them and run it through like effects channels live. So we'd have like looping clips from Alien and Star Wars and stuff like that. But you can't really do that now.
That's very, very true. Well, we haven't talked about sci-fi. Like, what are you, a Doctor Who guy? Are you a Star Trek guy? Are you a Star Wars guy? Are you all of the above guy? What's your sci-fi flavor?
I mean, yeah, I was born in '77, so I've got Star Wars in my veins.
Yes,
I
yes.
grew up loving Star Wars. I mean, like the Alien films. I think as now that I'm older, I do love sci-fi that touches on horror a little bit. So like
Yeah.
Alien, Predator, things like that. I'm a
Hmm.
big fan of. But obviously, yes, Star Wars was just something I grew up with. Um, I got to work with Mark Hamill for 1 week when
Really?
the previous place that where we were working on the game Star Citizen, which is a big,
Yeah.
huge crowd-funded like sci-fi open universe
It's
game.
fantastic.
And
Yeah. Hmm.
I had to stand in for a week for another guy down at the motion capture sessions in London. So I spent a week working with Mark Hamill, and it was just as wonderful as I hoped it would be. He was adorable, and just they couldn't
Love it.
stop him talking about Star Wars. He would just come out with anecdote after anecdote about it.
That's amazing.
So yeah, I think that side of it. And I've done quite a few sci-fi games over the years. I did like Aliens versus Predator and Crisis 1, 2, and 3, which were
Yeah.
really nice sci-fi games to work on. Like that kind of sound design and stuff is a real pleasure. It's
Hmm.
um, it's a interesting and difficult thing building up like sci-fi understandable feedback because those games have a lot of technical weapons and armor and spaceships and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So you need a lot of beeps and boops to tell people what's going on when a weapon needs reloading or a ship is landing. So the difficulty for that is keeping those languages understandable and not layering them too heavily so that it just becomes a mishmash of sci-fi noise, which is what it always does in the middle of the project, and then you have to stop and think, okay, this is just space noise now. We need to untangle this a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were cool games to work on.
You said earlier something about, when you were working really hard on the band and you were, working retail or however you said it, and you hadn't really explored other avenues to make money as a
Yeah.
musician. So talk about when that happened and then also when sound design became a part of your kind of arsenal, Because it's a long way from pushing samples on stage to like being a sound
Yeah.
designer, right? So, yeah.
Um, yeah, it's very specific to a person really. I was playing with my band Goteki at a festival in the UK, and it was backstage after we'd played, and someone said, "I've got a friend of a friend here who loves your band. He would like to just come say hi and chat about your band and stuff." And obviously that's lovely. So it turned out to be Graham Norgate, who's the composer for GoldenEye and Perfect Dark and a
Yeah.
load of classic games and Time Splitters. At that point, me and my friends in our little house in Bristol in the south of the UK, we were playing Time Splitters every day for hours. We loved it. So he introduced himself and said how much he liked my band and just being polite. I said, "Oh, so what do you do?" And so I write music for games like Time Splitters. And I went absolutely crazy. But that became the beginning of a very long friendship. We're like brothers now. Basically, we've
Oh,
written a
wow.
load of music together. We've worked together in various companies. But he liked my music enough to let me have some opportunities writing on Time Splitters 2, and just for one track on that, and that went well. So I wrote more for Time Splitters 3, and then he started getting me as like a freelancer, just doing some dialogue editing and some sound effects and things like that. And then the
Okay.
company he worked for, Free Radical, they're expanding, and he had the opportunity to hire someone. So he said, "Come up and do an interview, and we'll see how it goes." Um, so like you said, though, when I started, my background was purely as a musician. So I think the cool thing is that those skills are very transferable into sound design. Like if you need to make like a laser gun firing, the things you need to do to get that sounding cool and punchy are really no different from making a kick drum sound punchy in a track. It's still
Mm.
pushing the transients, making sure that it's across the frequency band, making sure it's got a nice attack and curves nicely, all that stuff. So like when I'm working here, I use Cubase for everything,
Okay.
which is quite uncommon these days. It's more of a
Yeah.
composer's tool, not a sound designer's tool. But I use it for both sound design and music, and always have.
Okay.
So the creative process for me for sound design or music is, there's really no difference whatsoever in it. It's the same tools, the same software, sitting in the same place. So I think it has always, for me, just been one creative process. I've never had a strong distinction between them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly, especially being an electronic musician, obviously you learned a ton of skills to cross over for sure.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Were you gonna? Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think you're right. I mean, it was never something that was planned or anything, but
Yeah.
the fact that writing electronic music means you pick your sources from wherever you want, and maybe and like industrial music as well, throwing in noises like Nine Inch Nails do. They'll use like pitch down the sound of like cameras reloading or metal hits and stuff like that. So I didn't know that that's what I was doing, but before I knew what sound design was, really, I was kind of sound designing when I was building those tracks. So
Right.
I was pretty fortunate.
Well, and I mean, anyone who's worked with layered audio can know how big of a shit show that can become quickly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't imagine how complex it is. Just the audio design of electronic music is tremendously complex because of well, I mean, that's true for recording, I think probably all music, but I think with electronic music, you know what I'm getting at, right? It can just become a muddy mess. Yeah.
I think so. I mean, like you say, I think recording for an orchestra, there's the same principles going on of groups doing bass sounds, layering up through the octaves and stuff like that. But with you don't have the structure and the useful limitations of orchestral composing, where famously certain combinations of instruments work really well, or certain sections can handle something in particular. And I mean, I've written a lot of music. I think I've only released for songs and things probably 10% of the stuff that I've written. And yes, like sometimes it does become it loses its way, and it just becomes a big wash of electronic noise that's just meaningless. I mean, I've had plenty of times, as I'm sure all composers have, where I didn't even save the project in the end. I'll just, after 3 or 4 hours, I'll just say, well, this is crap, and just close it and walk away. They can't all be brilliant.
That's very true. So Texas Chainsaw has a soundtrack release and a vinyl, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is very exciting. What else do you want people to know about I mean, there's so much to talk about still, but, Texas or anything else?
Well, I mean, I think if people haven't played it, even if you're not in particular like a horror fan, give it a go, because it's really is a thrilling experience. And if you're interested in the music I've made for it, definitely listen to the soundtrack. But as I said before, that those are montages of elements of the game. And if you want to really understand the music that I wrote for it, you have to play the game and experience it and see how every time you play, it'll be different, and how it builds and swells and messes with you and stuff. So, like people with the Microsoft consoles, if you have the Game Pass, which is the subscription service, you can play it for free as well. You can just get that. But if even if you're not a gamer, but you're interested in how this music sounds, then at very least I would say just watch some streamers playing it, or watch some footage on YouTube to get a better understanding of how it works. I really learned a lot from consciously listening to like dynamic soundtracks of games like Red Dead Redemption and things like that had these really cool systems. So if you're interested in game music and dynamic music, hopefully if you just play or watch people playing the game, then I think you can get a lot out of that. So I'd highly recommend that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope people enjoy the vinyl as well. It's very pretty. I love it. I've ordered so many copies. They sent me a load of copies very kindly, but I ordered a load more as well.
Yeah. You're just gonna paper the walls with them, or what?
I just want to make sure that I can give them to everybody and anybody that comes to my house.
Yes.
Whether they want it or not.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I think too, because you're still actively playing the game, like, which I love that because, I mean, I work in radio. And so when I get home, if I've done, 6 hours of radio, I tend to not come home and then turn on the radio, which some people do. I'm not that person. Sometimes I am, but you know what I mean? But so, and that's got nothing to do with what I'm about to say, because it seems like if things weren't quite right in that game, I don't think you would find such pleasure in playing it. You know what I mean? So I think it speaks to the craftsmanship of what you did and what you achieved just by the fact that you relax by playing that game, which is really cool,
Yeah, I think that's a good point actually, and I've found it quite difficult over the years to listen to anything I've done once it's released, because like anybody that makes creative things, all you kind of see is the problems and the mistakes and the things you didn't do once it's released. So while there are always going to be things that I would like to have added and just stuff like that. This game, more than any other that I've done, I think I'm able to actually listen to it without cringing and without stressing, because I think I used the time well, and I think I managed to get in pretty much everything I wanted to get in, which was great. Also, it's because it's a live service, which is a very sort of modern thing. It used to be, back when we'd make games that are primarily physical copies, it would be crazy push to get it done. Bam, you get it done, it's finished. And it's kind of that was nice in some ways, but also it meant that if I made mistakes or anything like that, or forgot to do something, I had to live with that forever. Whereas at least now we have like rolling updates and things like that. So if there's anything that I suddenly notice, or I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot about that, then there is a chance to fix, which is cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. Yeah. What else are you playing right now? I'm sure you don't have all kinds of free time to play, but maybe you do. And what else are you playing?
I mean, I don't have a huge amount of time these days. I do like say I like to play a little bit of Texas Chainsaw. Like if my music work is sort of wrapped up at sort of 9 or 10 p.m. I'm like, okay, I think I've earned a little bit of playtime. Then I'll just do a couple of rounds either with my friends or family, or with strangers is fascinating as well. So I'm about to play the new Cyberpunk expansion just because it'll be a pleasure to go back to it. And the team that I was working for supplying the music are great guys, and their lead audio coder, Colin Mulder, we've worked together in a load of companies. He's an old friend, so he's been telling me about all the improvements that they've got. A big new patch that fixes and improves and adds a huge amount of content to it. So I'm excited to see that, and for the sake of experiencing what the team have done, I'm just looking forward to getting back into it. And it's just such a rich world, and the style of music that they wrote for it's like a genre in itself. It's you hear people copying that style now, but that wasn't really a pre-existing style of music. It sort of touches on industrial and synthwave and stuff like that, but but it's very much its own thing, and it's very identifiably cyberpunk. So I'm pleased they're finally getting the recognition and from the press and stuff that they deserve for that, which is cool.
I'm glad I'm getting into it. I've been wanting to from the start, but of course the start was troubled, and so I just kind of held off. And then there's been I have a PlayStation, and there's been a free demo on there for ages, and I guess I was just finally in the right place. And then I looked at the price, and I'm like, oh my God, it's on sale for $40. I'm just going to buy it. And so I bought it. And also knowing that there was this big expansion that just came out, which is supposed to be pretty fantastic. So yeah, I've been really, really excited since I downloaded it last night, and it's probably what I'm going to do a little bit later today, which is fun. But yeah, anything else that you've been playing lately over the summer, or mostly just Texas and the like.
What else did I play? I feel like I'm missing something. I've been um I've been waiting for a quieter time to play the remake of Last of Us Part One because
Ah,
I'm a huge fan of that game generally. Every
yeah,
aspect of it,
yeah,
the acting, the directing, the storytelling, the ambient sound, the music. I just think it's a masterclass in, classy design. Um, so I wanted to really have some proper time to dig in and play it without feeling guilty that I should be doing other music and stuff.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I love that game.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I think it's sort of elevated, games
Yeah,
overall. I think it's proven that they can be a very classy, uh, you know, mature medium for people to work in. So
mm-hmm.
just love it. It's just
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. I love it too, and I loved the show, and I also
Yeah.
loved how we gamers who played it years and years ago knew what was coming,
Mm.
and then there's the reaction of non-gamers at the end of the first season. And like still to this day, my friend Sam, who mixes the show, he's producer, he's audio
Oh, cool.
engineer and composer and artist and all those things. Um, nerd friend. We'll still like kind of argue about it in a way, which is funny. Because I'm like, you're 10 years late now. Like we all had these discussions years and years ago, but
Yeah,
but I love that, and I love that that it's kind of taken on a new life in that way.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that's been great. I did actually download it and start to play it,
Mm.
and I got. It's not long before you stumble across clickers, right? I mean that happens pretty early, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, no, no, no. Made it through once. I'm not gonna do that to myself again. It's so funny.
It
But
is a difficulty when games are so scary. I guess, I mean, maybe with Texas Chainsaw, I'm a little bit, uh, you know, I mean, even myself, even though I make all those sounds, there's been times when I've screamed and dropped my controller. Even though I literally made every sound that I'm hearing here that's scaring me, but I still get scared by it. But
uh,
I mean, there's games like Alien Isolation that I was so stressed and scared and sweaty, shaky hands
yeah,
playing it that in the end I didn't quite finish it. I just thought, am I? This game is wonderful. It's a masterpiece, but I'm not
yeah,
sure if I'm having fun
yeah.
because it was
It's
supposed
a
to be
little
my
too
chill
stressful.
time in the evening.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
I'm sure people have the same thoughts about Texas now. It's like this
Yep.
this is the hopefully it's equal parts fun and terrifying.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's been really successful, and so congrats to you and the whole team on
Oh,
that.
thank you.
It's just been really fun to learn about it, and independently of that, it's been super fun just to hear so much of your music over the years and your personal stuff. I love that, and
Thank you.
yeah, it's just been an absolute pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's lovely that people are enjoying it. That's all we could have
Yeah.
hoped for when after the team was very passionate about it. So all
Yeah.
we wanted was for people to love it and play it, and that's happened. So
Hmm.
yes, we're absolutely delighted.
Good. All right. Well, Ross, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add before we take off for the day?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if anybody has any questions about the sound design or the music, I'm easy to find on like Twitter and YouTube and stuff. I do loads of little videos just talking about aspects of it, just for because I love talking about it. But I'm always happy to answer people's questions. So just find me and ask away, and I'll try and help.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much, Ross.
No problem.